Hello, everybody. Matt Sweetwood here with my exciting Sunday night live show. Can't wait for my audience to join me. This is where we talk about how you can have a big life. And that's really what I'm here for, is to try to help others have a big life like I have. And we're going to talk about subjects like divorce and dating, and like we're going to do today, marriage and parenting and health, and those issues that are really important in your life, relationships. That's something that I really like to focus on. So in New York today, we had a beautiful weekend. I know a lot of people who follow me probably know that I ran a very exciting photo tour yesterday. We had a really excellent time touring Manhattan. You can check on my Facebook wall and on my Instagram, Sweetwood, as time goes on, and you'll see some pictures from that. We had a really good time walking around New York City. Um, Today's topic is actually going to be on marriage. I was trolling around last weekend in New York City, and I had turned up 42nd Street, not the 42nd Street in Times Square, but actually the 42nd Street by Grand Central Station. And as I turned the corner, Cipriani's is right there. And for those of you that don't know, Cipriani's is a very, very famous restaurant hall where you have very high-end events. And as I walked by, there was a wedding party there. First, I walked by the bride and all her bridesmaids, and you'll see if you look on my Facebook wall, I took a selfie, sort of a terrified looking selfie with that, and then I walked up the street a little bit, and there were the grooms and the groomsmen, I think I have that right, were there, and I did the same thing, and I made a post, like I get scared when I see marriage. Now, my own story is that I was married and divorced twice. Married 8-something years, 8.5 years, 9 years, twice. First marriage, I had 5 kids with my wife, and she ended up leaving us when the kids were very young, and I ended up having to raise my kids on my own. Pepe from Spain has joined us, who just got married. Right, Pepe? You just got married. Okay, so you might want to listen carefully, or this might be too late for you. So my marriages had sort of a rough thing, and I married, a very similar kind of woman the second time. I'm sure they would have a different version of how the marriages went, but in any event, I found that marriage to be a very rough road. And if you look at the statistics today, it says that 50% of first marriages end in divorce, 67% of second marriages end in divorce, and 74% of third marriages end in divorce. Hey, Penny. Hey, Hillary. How you guys doing? So it's a pretty scary statistic. And you know what's really interesting is that people are most surprised not by the 50% first marriages ending in divorce, but really the fact that it goes up with second and third marriages. Oh, we're having a little bit of audio problem. That's like always a little bit of a Facebook problem. So I hope it clears itself up. And so the surprising aspect that marriages break up at a higher rate when you do your second and third marriages, you figured that, people would learn. But if you dig into the research on it, what you really find is that in second and third marriages, people are most afraid. They know divorce is dramatic, and it's dramatic and traumatic. And once you've been through divorce, it's a little bit easier to actually get through divorce. And as a result, people are more likely to divorce the second time. Let's pause on that while I have a sip of my coffee. I actually was working today, so I had a late workout today and ended up having my coffee late today. Don't worry, I'm going to sleep. Everybody's going to type I'm not asleep. I can drink coffee as I'm falling asleep. It's good. I'm a high energy person, so coffee actually takes me down, a little bit. In any event, so really the issue is marriage a failed institution? And here in New York City, there's a lot of articles that are written about how men are really avoiding marriage. They avoid, really the commitment. And a lot of that has to do with what I think is, a very, very difficult legal system, particularly here in the Northeast for men. They know that if they get married, and particularly if they have children, they're going to be responsible. It's going to be a very, very difficult financial situation. And, and everybody has become aware that marriage is really a very, very difficult endeavor. And as a result, I think that, people, particularly younger people, are more reluctant to get married. I did do a little bit of research, and I went out and I checked on what are the reasons that people are getting divorced. And when you start to look through the reasons of why they're getting divorced, you can start to see why marriage has become such a scary thing. One of the reasons, I'll sort of count them down and I'll go through them, why people get divorced, and that should give us a little bit of insight into what's really going wrong with people getting married. So the number one cause of marriages breaking up is infidelity, cheating on your partner. And back in the day, it was much harder it was in a way easier to do because you couldn't observe people. But today, finding people, there's websites that allow you to cheat. Everybody remembers the scandal on this. I won't mention the website, but the website where they were hacked. And, so finding somebody to, a compatible person to do that with is actually relatively easy. Finding inventory in terms of that is relatively easy. Another reason why marriages break up is money. And I always view that really as the biggest reason, is that money always puts a strain on a marriage. It's a very, very difficult thing. And in today's world, for those of you that have kids that have gone out into the world, hey Norma, how you doing? By the way, I want the show to be interactive. So if any of you have comments or things, please feel free. I see Penny, you asked, people are less apt to put up with much. I agree with that. But Penny, that really is totally related to the fact that if they don't like the relationship they're in, even if it's a marriage, it's very easy just to pick up your smartphone and start looking for other people. It's just something you can easily do. And I think that drives a lot of what you're saying about that. But money is a very, very big issue. And in today's world, young people have a very, very hard time actually earning a living. So you can imagine if you have two young people which are thinking about getting married, they're going to be under financial strain to start with. And if there's an imbalance in the earning, because in the old days, it used to be, you would think the man would go off to work and the woman would stay at home, but that's not the case anymore. And if there's an imbalance in the income level, it's going to create a conflict because there are no wife stays home, husband goes to work anymore. Those conventions are gone. And as a result of that, if one person is earning, in today's society, this is, the women's right movement is that, if you're a man, you're a young person getting married today, you don't see why your wife should stay at home. And if she's not earning as much as you, it's going to create conflict. And conversely, there's still some aspect to women, being in the dating environment right here. Most women in Manhattan really are not interested in dating men that make less than them. So you can see how that money object can create a problem. Other things that tend to lead to breakups of marriage are constant arguing and lack of communication and all of those things that go with it. But once again, this falls, I think, under the situation of you're less likely to work out the problems today because it's really much easier to go off. So the real question to ask is, why should we get married? Does anybody want to offer why in today's world you need to get married? Back in the old day, one of the driving forces in getting married is that it was considered a big deal to actually live together. People would actually look at it askance. They would be like, living together is immoral, you would be looked down at, you could lose your job, people would talk about you. They would say bad things about you. But today, this is not an issue at all. You can get married, you can have kids, you can have a gay partner, you can be gay. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't really affect anything anymore. So you can do whatever you want. So my question is, why would you get married? If somebody is, I really want to hear a cogent argument on why you should get married. Now, if you think about it, a marriage is ultimately just a contract. And that contract is actually only as good as the people involved in the contract. Now, if your people going into it don't have a good relationship, that contract is not going to hold people together. And that goes back to my original point, which is what people realize. I know I've spoken to other guys and they're like, look, what do I need this for? If I go into this and it doesn't work out, that contract, that marriage device is gonna make it worse for me, is gonna make it hard for me. So why should I get married? I can go out with a woman. If she doesn't like the commitment, I can just move on and go with somebody else. So this, to me, is really a big issue that's facing our society today. And then I want to make another point here, which is something that, is going to take a little bit of the romanticism out of marriage. And that's that we have to realize that marriage is a humongous business in and of itself. You have our society, there is a whole sub-economy that is geared around people getting married, from caterers to dressmakers to tuxedo rental places to flowers to photography to banquet halls to all of the magazines and the publications and all of that stuff. So society, just like a lot of the holidays like Mother's Day and Father's Day and so on, are driven by commercialism. Marriage itself is driven by commercialism. And I'm not exactly sure that, marriage itself by itself is really a viable idea. I think it's driven a lot by the commercialism. And then on the reverse side, okay, we have to remember that on the reverse side is divorce. Christy, actually, that's a really good point. And Christy just made a really good point that one of the main reasons people get married is due to religion. But in our society, secularism, in other words, the movement away from religion, actually is on the rise. We're in a more secular environment than we've ever been. And this is definitely a push in the liberal movement, is to really make our society much more secular. There's been many books written on this. There's a famous book written by Bill O'Reilly, like him or hate him, not commenting, called Culture War, Culture Warrior, or something like that, where he talks about how the country is dividing, and it's more than just the political divide. It's the left and the right. It's a secular religious thing. So as our society becomes more secular and less, Judeo-Christian focused, you're going to see that marriage itself as an institution is really less important from a moral reason. And certainly, if you look here in New York City, I don't know what the statistics are, I should check, but I can imagine how many people are living here in Manhattan, right behind me, not married, and nobody will care. Nobody will care at all. I even think of how I viewed it. In other words, when I was much younger, the idea of living together and how I view my children. I won't say anything about whether they're living with people or not, but how I view my children. And I'm not sure, part of me being old-fashioned would be upset if my children were living with somebody without being married. On the other hand, I'm trying to be modern about it. Like, maybe it's better if they do. I know I read something from a rabbi's advice that I read a lot, and he argues that living with people before you're married actually takes away from the likelihood the marriage will be successful, but I'm not really convinced. So I'm not sure. And like I said, I believe that marriage, do we teach our young people, particularly young women, to aspire to have a big wedding? I would say the answer is yes. I would say that this is something we do. It's something that we tell them that this is that it's a show of, it's a demarcation. It's, I don't know, in a way, maybe it presents actually a false promise that if you actually get married, everything is going to be okay. Maybe if it wasn't, so firm from a legal contract, people would work at marriages better. But I'm going to get to that point in a little bit. Let me sort of go back to the divorce side, which is divorce is also a huge business. So that if your marriage is in trouble or you want a divorce, I mean, attorneys and experts and court systems and judges and psychiatrists and all sorts of industries actually benefit from the divorce industry. Even the real estate industry benefits from divorce, because in divorce, the vast majority of the times the marital home has to be sold, and it usually has to be sold under distress. So in that case, when it's sold, it actually sold at a lower price and it turns. And so when you look at this whole gadget that's been created, this whole marriage gadget, this marriage and divorce, it's really centered around a lot of old-fashioned social norms. Christy actually just posted that the divorce industry is a $50 billion industry. And I don't even know if that includes alimony payments. You think that includes alimony payments? That's right. And Michael just pointed out that his friend is on 4+ years of her divorce. So you should know that my first divorce ended up being one of the longest divorces in the history of New Jersey. One of the longest divorces. It was over, actually, the initial, it started in 96. The first divorce order was issued in 2000. It was appealed several times. It was like, I can't even tell you. You'll have to read my book, Man Up, which is going to be out next February in 2018, and I do talk about that. But the divorce industry is really an enormous industry. And so you start to look at, when you have commercial industries like that, they put heavy pressure on the social side of our existence. If you look at the way the medical profession works, the way the food profession works, the way all of these various industries work, that you learn things. Social norms are created, but they're actually created by the quest for business. And I have to tell you that I think that there's a lot to marriage that's related around the business aspects. We're taught at a young age that this is what we should aspire to. We're taught to have a wedding and spend all of this money. We're taught that if the marriage isn't go so well, you go get counseling. If you get a divorce, you hire an attorney, you do this. You go for alimony, you fight, you go in the court, then you do more psychiatrists, and you go through all of this. And in the meanwhile, all of these industries are really sucking up our money. Maya, I was going for 5.5 years, paid 700 grand to lawyers. Just so you know, Maya, I paid about the same to my lawyers, and that was back in 1996, 97, 98, 99. I had a crazy divorce, almost $1 million. So, and that was just in legal and expert fees. It was an insane kind of thing. So you can see that. So Hillary, you're a second wife. What does that mean? That means you only have a 1 in 3 chance, right, of making it? So when I'm getting back to the original point, is marriage really a viable, entity anymore? So here's what I'm going to say. I have the ultimate idea for marriage. Everybody ready for this? I've said this to a few people, and I've gotten a pretty good response from most people. Every once in a while, I can thank Disney movies for this. That's right. Right? Does every girl, is this being sexist when I say that every girl wants to be Cinderella or something like that? Or what's the Disney movie where we're looking for the bride or something? I don't know. Whatever. So here is my suggestion for marriage. Marriage should be, everybody ready? Marriage should be a 2-year contract, renewable every 2 years. What will that accomplish? Okay? Number one, it creates the legal device so that you have access to the other people. You can, you're responsible for the other person in good ways and in bad ways. You can sign in joint bank accounts, and you can own things together, and you can do all of those things and have kids and, in the way that you want. It creates the moral platform that you have. But here's what happens, is that in 2 years, you get to see what the other person is like. And each person in the marriage knows that that 2 years is coming around, which means that each person has to perform. Now imagine you had a contract in business, and that contract was written in a way that was permanent, and you didn't have to perform at all to be able to be held to the contract. Excuse me here, I'm choking. I think this might be one of my ex-wives casting a spell on me right now. That's why I'm choking. They know that I'm talking about this. So every 2 years it comes around. Now 1 year is not enough, because you want to see a Christmas, you want to see a Hanukkah, you want to see the holidays, you want to see how they behave in the seasons of the month, and it gives you time. And so 2 years is perfect. Now, if you have a contract in business that requires no performance on your part, and it's for life, what kind of performance you're going to give that? Imagine hiring an employee and saying you have a lifetime contract. In fact, if you stay in the contract for 5 or 10 years, I'm going to have to pay you forever. And you don't have to do anything. You can just, in fact, you can actually treat me badly. You can waste my money. You can treat me badly. You can treat my kids badly, and I got to pay you for life. What kind of contract is that? But if you have a 2-year contract, let's be a little bit sexist about this, or I'll be a little bit old-fashioned about this. So you're in a marriage, and the husband, it doesn't treat the wife right. He's not a good listener. He doesn't protect her feelings. He's not protective of her. He doesn't provide for her. He's not good. Well, she can do better. She doesn't have to be committed to him. She doesn't have to have children with him. She doesn't have to do anything. She can say, look, you didn't turn out to be the guy that I thought you were going to be, and she can move on. And then what about the man? She's with her. She's not taking care of him. She's not, I know I'm being a little bit, it's okay, too bad, be mad at me, I don't care. So she's not treating him right. She's not sleeping with him. She's not doing the things that, you know, he kind of expected of her. And, you know, then he can be like, you know, I think it'll also force both people to keep themselves in good physical condition. Because when I look at the list of reasons, if you go to marriage.com, and you look at the top 10 reasons for why people get divorced, in there is people gain weight and get out of shape. And so if you have a 2-year contract on marriage, people are going to keep themselves in shape. They're going to remember that contract is coming due, that they're going to understand that they need to perform like you do in any business environment, like in any kind of contract. Right? Is there anybody here who's listening today, and we have quite a few people listening right now, does anybody out here who's listening have a job where they don't have to perform? I'm waiting. Nope, nobody has that. And Christy, that's actually right. A discussion of expectations, but that should go on in any relationship. When you hire an employee, there's a job description, you know, and the employee gets the benefits and gets the salary. So there's a discussion. When you have even a relationship, you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, there should be a discussion over what's expected, you know, in the relationship. And in a marriage, if you have that 2-year contract, when you're 6 months out from that contract, you're going to be starting to talk about each other like, you know, you're not doing what I need you to do. You're going to feel much more comfortable. And the ability to escape the relationship is not going to be so punishing. And the punishment is what keeps a lot of people in marriages. When you look at that 50% divorce rate, how many of the 50% that are in marriage actually would like to get out, but they can't afford to get out? It's too expensive. It's physically draining. You see this full head of hair I have right here? This full head of hair is the result of 2 divorces. So unless you're willing to have your hair look like that, you're going to have a trouble going through it. Okay, Tatiana says, I'm happy being alone. Okay, so Tatiana, I'm going to give you a love on that one, okay, because that's going to be my next topic next week. I'm going to talk about why you should love to be alone, why you shouldn't necessarily aim to be alone, but why you should love it. So I'm going to do that next time. But back to the marriage topic. So I believe that marriage, if you make this a 2-year contract, if you just think about that. Now, if the marriage is going really good, 30 days before, we can do this with a 30-day clause, because you can't just walk in on day 364 and say adios. So it should be 2-year renewable with, let's say, a 60-day renewal period. So at that 60 days, you sit there, you look each other in the eye, you say, I love you. You say, I love you, but I can't live with you. You say, I love you and I want to be with you, or you say whatever, and you actually decide to go for another 2 years. And if the marriage is no good, you just walk away, you separate. No, I don't want to say no hard feelings, but you separate without any billions. What was that? $50 billion being poured into the divorce industry, because the contract automatically splits. And the other thing in that 2-year contract should be what we call a prenup, but it should be a pre-division of the assets. And that contract should be a very simple contract drawn up. And everybody basically should have the same contract, and then marriage would be 2-year renewable. The effect of doing that, in my mind, is the marriage rate would soar. You would have more people getting married. You might even have less people getting divorced. Marriage would then become a more modern, viable institution, thinking back to when marriage actually came about and you married, you know, the butcher's daughter in town because she was the only woman of age appropriate. Now you can Tinder, Match.com, Matchmaker, bar, networking event. You can do all of that all over the place. So it's easy to find people. So I believe that if you went to a 2-year contract on marriage, the entire institution of marriage would be transformed. So let's go for it. Let's get the Congress, our Congress, to pass a law for a 2-year marriage. I'm going to end with a little anecdote, which I think you're going to find humorous. Does anybody know how the diamond engagement ring came about? Does anybody know? Do we think that it's been around like in caveman times? You know, they found a piece of crushed coal in the cave and they stuck it on the woman after they hit her with the club. They stuck it on her finger. It actually came about from an ad campaign in the late 1930s, just so you should all know. There was a time when De Beers, the famous diamond maker, actually was in trouble. And they engaged an ad agency called Ayer, A-Y-E-R. And there was some marketing clerk. It was actually in 1947. It outlined, it was like a subtle program that arranged for lecturers, you ready for this, to visit high schools across the country. And all the lectures revolved around diamond engagement rings, and they reached thousands of girls in their assemblies and the classes and the meetings, and they started to get them to be into it. And then they did a PR campaign with Hollywood personalities. They ended up with hundreds of newspaper descriptions and everything. And then in 1947, I think it was, the agency commissioned a series of portraits with fancy socialites wearing the rings, and that started the entire concept of that diamond ring. How about that? So the diamond ring, which I don't even know how much money is spent on diamond rings. Yeah, Nicholas Krauss from an ad agency just stepped in. So, Nick, it's ad agency's fault that we're all spending money on diamond rings. And so how many billions of dollars has the diamond ring industry become? Telling me not to mess with love. See, that's really the point, is that marriage has very little to do with love. Love and a meaningful relationship will sustain if the relationship is good, independent of the marriage contract. And I'll maintain that the marriage contract, the way it's construed today in society, with all of its business commerce, legality, and burden that gets placed on it, and lack of responsibility, actually causes marriages to collapse. I firmly believe that. We need our 2-year marriage. We need to get rid of these commercial things like diamond engagement rings. It's actually a crime that we're doing. It's a harm we're doing to young girls by thinking that when you get a diamond ring on your finger, you're going to have a great marriage. And the bigger the ring, the better the marriage. That's just not true. You know what determines a good marriage? 2 people loving each other, working hard together, working at the relationship day in and day out, and understanding that that marriage contract has nothing to do with the success of their marriage. If people would do that, they're going to end up having a successful marriage. Okay, that was my rant on marriage. Think about that 2-year contract idea. Feel free to use it. Just remember to tell them you got it from Matt Sweetwood. I hope you'll join me every Sunday night as I continue to do my live shows. Next week, I think I'm going to do that show on why you should love to be alone. I hope everybody enjoyed tonight. I want to thank you all for joining me. Thanks for the great contributions, really. I really appreciate that. It was really helpful. And come back next week, and we're going to talk about why, if you love to be alone, you're going to actually transform your entire life and the entire way you look at relationships. I want everybody, since this show is about helping you have a big life, I want everybody to go out and have a big week. Take care, everybody.